discuss current developments and plans for the future also. And I have an honor, so we can already put on the screen for like probably 2 of our online participants who are here with us from Kiev. And I have a pleasure to have on our panel Georg Milbradt. He is a special envoy of the German government for reforms in Ukraine, and before 2022 or earlier, he was responsible for decentralization in Ukraine. We know that Germany was a key country who was supporting this reform. Then I have a pleasure to introduce Jean-Pierre Froehly, who was recently appointed the head of the working group, which is preparing the reconstruction conference on Ukraine 2024. And he was for several years also the head of the division in the German Foreign Embassy, ministry responsible for Ukraine, Moldova, and Black Sea cooperation. And Olga Skrypnyk, she's the chairperson of the human rights group, and she's also coordinator of the expert network of the Crimean platform. In 2 weeks, there will be a Crimean platform parliamentary assembly in Prague, and some participants of this assembly will also come to Berlin. We will host an event with them. And we also have 2 participants online, and I have a pleasure to present Oksana Myronko. She is from European Business Association and from the initiative which is called Big Business for Ukraine. She will present the business perspective. She was supposed to come, but her child fell sick, and she's now online. And Tetyana Gavrysh, who is one of the founders of the initiative which is called Health Solutions for Open Society. And so we have different perspectives on the topic, and I would like to start with Georg Milbradt, because he was dealing with Ukraine in this important capacity, coordinating the reform for decentralization. And since we want to see Ukraine after the war as a country which is people-oriented, transparent, well-governed, which is not a post-Soviet country, but a European country. So the whole reconstruction should take place in such a way that it becomes a European country. And decentralization is a very important element of this idea, because it makes governance close to people. So I would like to ask you, Mr. Milbradt, to maybe briefly outline what this reform has brought to Ukraine. And now we see this different trend. We see that centralization of power or authority in Ukraine, concentration on the central level. Do you see the dangers of this reform being undermined, and what would be the future of the decentralization for Ukraine? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to this interesting conference. Decentralization, or better, I prefer the word local self-government, because it's about self-government doing things on their own. Was a great success. There was the Soviet heritage with over-centralization and under-governance, which, as I said, inherited Ukraine, and only after the Revolution of Dignity it was possible to really change the system, and it was one of the main reforms of the Maidan Revolution. And looking from today, it was the most popular and the most successful reforms of Ukraine during this time. A lot of reforms in Ukraine were painful, so they were never very popular, and some reforms were not so successful. They have not changed so much. The beginning of the reform was to make or to create romadas or municipalities which really can govern themselves, and that was not possible under the Soviet structure, because the Soviets had the principle divide and rule. Small entities which cannot do something dangerous. So they were totally dependent on people or institutions above. Therefore, the precondition for local self-government in the whole country was a territorial reform. this territorial reform was finished in 2021 during the Corona time, and the first election on the basis of the new territorial structure were in fall 2021. And the new mayors, the new councils took office in winter 2021 and to 2022. And it was just 2 months before the Russian invasion. Coming back to the reforms, the reform had the idea to decentralize money and competences. And a lot of the competences which were before placed on the rayon level were given to the new Romadas, and the money which the rayons got, that was a share in the personal income tax. So they had the same situation as the big cities, which already, cities with oblast significance, had the same situation, that they had a lot of competences and money. And on top of this, more money was given to these Romadas, which were created voluntarily. And the rest, as I said, in 21 were forced to amalgamate. So we have more than 1,000 capable Romadas in Ukraine, and compared to other East European or post-communist countries, it's a real success. You were very courageous, and I think this structure is a good one for the future, even if you look at demographic changes. Which will happen, which had happened and will happen in the future. The second idea was to improve or to improve democracy. To learn democracy, people have to have the must have the right to influence politics. To influence national politics is very very difficult, because of many citizens in the country, but on the local level it's possible. So my idea was that it's not only a technical reform, but a strategic reform which will change the mindset of the population, that they really understand that they are responsible for themselves, and that therefore they will elect persons who look after their interests, and not making petitions to Kiev for improving the local situation. And in those Romadas, which were created just behind the revolution on the voluntary basis, it worked. New mayors, a new type of mayors, a new type of politicians emerged, and I had the impression that without the war, in 5 or 10 years, the Verkhovna Rada, the parliament in Ukraine, would have a different structure, because then these people from the bottom will come up. So we are in a situation no longer top-down, but more bottom-up. Yet now, what is the situation in the war? First of all, the new mayors, the new council were confronted with the war, especially in those communities which were touched by the war, which were occupied, where destruction of Russian arms was, or damages from Russian military was seen. And therefore, they had to react. Before the reform, a lot of Ukrainians in Kiev said self-government is or can be create a form of separatism. Because if you are independent, people have some stupid ideas. And therefore, there was a fear that too much self-government means more separatism. But it was the opposite. During the wartime, the local councils and the local mayors were the center of the civil resistance. So this reform made Ukraine stronger, more resilient, and not weaker as it was feared before. During the war, normally you have a centralization. You have to centralize money, you have to centralize forces to fight the enemy. You have to make new priorities, more money to the military, less money to civil purposes. That is quite normal. The second is that in wartime, the military has priority concerning decisions, which are military decisions. Look at if there is a Romada at the front line, then the military must say what to do, how to defend the village or the town, to evacuate and so on. So, of course, the military administration had something to say. The problem now is that we have to look at this military necessities is not a reason for reversing this decentralization process. So, as I said, in the time of war, it is necessary where military aspects are in question, but you have to recreate and re-establish self-government when it's possible. And that is a big problem for Ukraine at the moment, what to do with the deoccupied territories, where maybe the mayor was killed, the local council is no longer there. So the end is it must be governed centrally, but this cannot be the future. So just as it was done in Germany after the war, as soon as possible, local administration should be recreated. If it's not possible to have elections, that's a problem at the moment in Ukraine. You cannot elect during war times. You have to find some sort of compromise, maybe a temporary appointment of mayors or a temporary appointment of local councillors, not those coming from Kiev, but from the municipality, from the village where you take decisions, so that in the end it is possible to have some local self-government even in deoccupied territories in war. The real problem is after the war. How to rebuild Ukraine? Who is responsible for taking decisions? First of all, who takes the decisions? What are the priorities of reconstruction? What money should be given to what purposes, to which level? That is under discussion now with Ukraine and the donors. My point of view is that, of course, there is a lot damaged on the local level, local infrastructure. So the reconstruction of local infrastructure should be done by local, the local institutions, but local governments where it's possible. Second, what is the percentage between local and central government? There's a damage assessment of the World Bank about the losses, damages in Ukraine. So you get an impression how much is damages on the central level, how manages on the local level, and the third is who gives not only decides about the reconstruction, but who is doing it, the administration, and there is a lack of capacity on the local level. as well as the lack of capacity on the national level. So especially the partners of Ukraine have to help to fill this gap. Then, of course, you have the problem of corruption. Corruption exists where you have money and power. If money and power is on the central level, you have corruption on the central level. If you decentralize power and money, you have it on the other level as well. So you have to look how to fight corruption. Before the war, there was, I think, a very excellent example in Ukraine how to fight corruption with this ProZorro system. It was a system for procurement, and every step of this process was open, was in the internet. First, what should be created or for services would be demanded, the offers and the decision. And all the corruption scandals during the war and during Corona were in those parts of the administration, either local or central, where ProZorro was not used. Because under Corona it was said, well, the ventilators, when we have to procure them very fast, it's not possible to do this process. It takes too much time. Second, military, they have the same problem. There was a corruption scandal concerning socks and something like this. This has nothing to do. This is for military. It has nothing to do with military purposes. They have corruption and rebuilding, reconstructing roads. So this is the main problem, and I think you have to introduce this ProZorro system as far as possible. And second, transparency. Without transparency, you cannot fight corruption. You cannot only depend on anti-corruption agencies or anti-corruption corps. You need the population. And this means transparency. You need the press. And that is possible on the local level as well as on the central level. That would be my recommendation for the future.
Thank you so much. So it seems we have good foundations for reconstruction, meaning that there is a decentralized system in Ukraine, and we hope that we can preserve it after the war. And I would like now to turn to Olga Skrypnyk, because one of the important issues I think we will face after the war is that what to do with the people who lived for so long under occupation, and how to restore the social fabric in Ukraine, how to avoid these tensions which might emerge. And already now in some occupied territories there are cases of state pressure, so people who so how you differentiate between people who lived under occupation or those who helped maybe the occupators, and all these issues which damage social fabric. So what will be your vision on this?
Thank you, Iryna. Hello, everyone. Thank you for organizing these important discussions today, and thank you for inviting me. I represent the Crimean human rights group, TIP. We have been collecting evidence of international crimes in Crimea since 2014. And also I am co-coordinator of Expert Network of Crimea platform. International Crimea platform now is only international format for the occupation of Crimea, and was established in 2021. It was initiative of President Volodymyr Zelensky, and Crimea platform coexist in 3 dimensions: governmental, parliamentary, and Iryna said about parliamentary summit in Prague, and also in expert level. So about Crimea, after the Crimea occupation in 2014, Russia began preparing contributing to Crimea to full-scale invasion, and all the Crimean practices of persecution, deportation of children, forced passportization, illegal mobilization, destruction of Ukrainian identity are now being used in the newly occupied territories, but on a new scale and with increased brutality, including the killing of thousands of civilians. After February 2022, Russia transformed the Crimea Peninsula not only into key military bases, but also into entire site of unfreedom, and Ukrainian prisoners of war and civilian hostages from newly occupied territories like Kherson or Zaporizhia regions, now also in Crimea, in detention center, for example, in Simferopol. And also Ukrainian children from territories occupied after occupied after 2024 are forcibly located there. And Ukrainian citizens are being persecuted for their political views, opposition to the occupation, or opposition to the war, or religion affiliation. Among political prisoners are journalists, Crimean Tatar and Ukrainian activists, and also Crimean residents are being persecuted for any demonstration of pro-Ukrainian position in Crimea, even for singing Ukrainian song, for example, Червона калина.
Maybe we should not discuss so much the human rights situation in the Crimea, because it's very much documented,
yes.
but really talk about
yes,
challenges.
Yeah, it's my next point, and your question about strategy of reintegration people from occupied territory is very important now, because now we have real possibility to deoccupy Crimea thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine and support of our partners. So, about strategy. In March 2021, the President of Ukraine adopted the strategy of the occupation and reintegration of Crimea. But with the start of the large-scale invasion, this strategy was not revised, considering new challenges that it was in 2022. And prospect of liberated Crimea is no longer just political and diplomatic instrument. It was sweepingly changed. The territory of Crimea shall be returned by military actions. However, in addition to issues of military tactics or strategy, the getting on prospect of deoccupying the territory of Crimea gives rise to many matters regarding the ways or forms reintegrating the peninsula residents into information, culture, educational, social spheres of Ukraine. Therefore, it's important to develop and adopt overall vision of reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories, including Crimea, and important that development of this strategy should take into account experience that we have after the occupation some territories in 2022 and 2023, like Kherson. It's very important. And it's the parliament that should become a platform for discussing, for drafting laws for reintegrating occupied territories. But unfortunately, since the start of large-scale invasion, our government, Verkhovna Rada, has become less open for civil society. And at the same time, maintain connection between parliamentary committees and civil society representatives is very important, because it's critical for addressing key challenges that we have in reintegrating of deoccupied territories. And for example, it's possible to restore the options for NGOs to participate in parliamentary committees online. It's like one of our suggestions. And one more issue that's very important now, it's about civilian hostages, because Russian aggression is resulted in thousands of civilian hostages, tortures, and enforced disappearance. And it's crucially important to establish an efficient international mechanism for identify civilian hostages, also for release and return them to Ukraine-controlled territory. The current exchange process, I think you know about some process between Russia and Ukraine, but it's only about prisoners of war, about military. And now we don't have any mechanism for civilian hostages, how we can release them. And Ukraine should become proactive and initiate international negotiation about this platform, how we can create and what we can do for these civilians. And it's not only about Ukraine, it's also very important for other regions, and we see it, for example, in Israel. And one more issue about people who stay, for example, in occupied territories. It's about collaboration or collaborationism. So we think it's very important to change approaches to bring into criminal responsibility for cooperation with occupational authorities for people who stay in occupied territories. It's about Crimea since 2014. So it's worth bringing to criminal responsibility for living and to working in the occupation the persons whose actions ensure the establishment the occupation regime or whose activities adversely affected the state of Ukraine. But other Crimeans should be protected from such persecution. And of course, also we need a strategy for educational integration of the occupied Crimea residents. And this strategy should include system to overcome the difference between Russian educational system and Ukraine. Because Russian system works only for militarization of children. And this system, for example, in Crimea, is focusing for preparing Crimea children for serving in Russian army. And last but not least, we also need to have a clear vision of how to overcome the consequences of aggressive Russian propaganda and its impact on the local population, as well as to develop legal procedure for Russian citizens who illegally moved to Crimea after Crimea occupation. But of course, the latter issue is highly dependent to the scenario under which Crimea will be liberated. And so I think I stop here and pass floor to my colleagues. Yeah.
There are also demographic aspect is very important, I guess, right? Because many people left these territories earlier and they settled down somewhere else. And children grew up already in these territories, and I think it will be very difficult to reconcile all these problems. But now I'd like to turn to our two online participants, and I'll first give a floor to Tetyana Gavrysh. She deals a lot with healthcare issues, and by the way, this is one of the issues we chose as the issue for parliamentary dialogue between Ukraine and Germany. And the healthcare problem system in Ukraine faces a lot of challenges, especially because of the war, also because a lot of people are injured, and psychologically also. And I would like you, Tetyana, to maybe outline the problems you see and how they should be taken into consideration when we talk about reconstruction, recovery of Ukraine. Thank you.
Good evening for everyone. Iryna, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a good chance for me to share some thoughts in this audience. I've just arrived to Kharkiv from Kyiv 3 hours ago, and here is the air alarm, but I hope everything will be okay during the panel. Indeed, war creates significant challenge for the health of people and the healthcare system in Ukraine. In areas that have experienced occupation or are near the front lines, there is a noticeable increase in chronic non-infectious disease due to prolonged stress and the inability to seek timely medical attention. This includes cardiovascular diseases, cancer, diabetes, and unprecedented rise in cases of type 2 diabetes in children, as well as mental health issues. You're right. But overall, Ukraine's healthcare system has endured. Medical service providers contracted by the National Health Services received funding from the government. Even in hospitals under occupation, those hospitals that managed to evacuate some of their staff to Ukrainian territory are also partially funded to maintain their medical personnel. This became possible thanks to a successful healthcare system reform that happened after the Revolution of Dignity. Change in funding principles, reform in the management of healthcare facilities, and creating an independent and transparent system of medical procurement provided resilience to the healthcare system even under the challenging conditions of a full-scale war, which is unprecedented for such large country. Another notable development is the effective collaboration between the military and civilian healthcare systems, which essentially established a unified system for assisting civilian and military casualties from the early days of the full-scale war. Both systems are currently undergoing significant transformations, moving from a rigid Soviet doctrine to a patient-centered healthcare system that follows modern NATO standards. However, the most significant challenge for the country is preserving its human capital. Official data before the full-scale invasion indicated Ukraine's population was 42 million. Exact calculations are difficult at the moment, but according to the Ukrainian Institute for the Future, in 2022, Ukraine's population had decreased to 29 million. In my opinion, these figures are overly optimistic. Around 10 million people have left since the start of the full-scale invasion, with some remaining in occupied territories, and more than 1 million people are currently in the military. It's worth noting that among those who have left, there are a significant number of women of reproductive age, children, and teenagers. Therefore, by the end of the war, Ukraine's population will not only significantly decrease in numbers, but also undergo change in its structure, as there will be a substantial reduction in the working age population. This is an important factor to consider when planning the country's economic recovery, because investments alone cannot promote economic development without people who have consumer capacity. Our foundation, Health Solutions for Open Society, is working on strategies to preserve and develop human capital. Specifically, we work with communities, with Romadas, to help them create a new healthcare management system by establishing integrated decision-making centers. Thanks to the decentralization reform, as Mr. Milbradt mentioned, which has created conditions to the financial and administrative independence of communities. They have the potential to create and implement their policies to meet the population's needs more quickly and efficiently than the state in central level. Currently, we are working with experts from the Germany company ofthe with support of ULIT to adapt the model that has been operating in the Kinzigtal German community for over 30 years to Ukrainian realities. This model focuses on developing and implementing integrated interventions that enhance the quality of life and health of people using optimal resources, which is very important during the wartime and after. Currently, the project involves 5 Ukrainian Romadas, including those in the rear, near the front lines, and the occupied territories like Bucha, which is the main Romada in this pilot project. Essentially, it is a pilot project that will allow the creation of effective management systems in communities that can quickly respond to people's needs for medical and social services. This is particularly important in anticipation of the demobilization of civilians who will return to their Romadas and will require a significant amount of specialized medical services, including psychological and physical rehabilitation, and other support necessary for their full integration into the community. This will be hundreds, if not thousands, of people in need of special support. Therefore, today, all state and local policies in Ukraine are adapting to new challenges. Of course, we need additional expertise and resources, but it is evident that any international support strategy for Ukraine's recovery must take into account the challenge related to actual and potential loss of human capital, which could significantly complicate the recovery process. In our understanding, health should be considered as a valuable asset in a broader context, not just as satisfactory mental and physical well-being, but also as the opportunity to realize oneself in one's community and country.
Thank you for making this linkage between decentralization and health. It's very important, and also turning our attention to some interesting projects which are already underway and might pave the way for other similar projects during the recovery process. And now I'd like to give the floor to Oksana Myronko from the European Business Association. We would like to know more about how private sector survives the war, let's put it this way, in Ukraine, and what prospects it sees for itself after the war. So please go ahead, Oksana.
Good evening, colleagues. Good evening from Kiev. It's a pleasure to be here. Hope next time we'll have an opportunity to meet in person. Of course, and obviously, businesses suffered from the war as well. But as Churchill said, if you are going through the hell, continue going. So business continue working in Ukraine. The thing that we perceive in our European Business Association community, and it's around 1,000 companies that work in Ukraine, 99% of companies continue to work. And it's big, medium, and small businesses. Also, companies continue to pay salaries to people, and nowadays even more than it was, for example, last year. As my colleague said, as basically Tetyana said, businesses understand the importance of human capital. Businesses already suffered from the lack of human capital and try to sustain especially good quality people as much as it's possible and in different ways. Businesses continue to support army, to support the country. Again, nowadays, even more than it was last year. Yes, businesses suffered from bombing. Businesses have, unfortunately, physical losses, and these losses grow from month to month. And for example, almost 20% of our business community told us that the amount of losses is in their companies is more than $10 million. And 35% of businesses mentioned that the amount of losses is from $1 up to $10 million. So it's tend to be pretty huge amounts of money that they lost, not taking into account some losses in terms of revenue, in terms of growth, and more. Businesses have obviously less financial resilience than it was last year, but still companies to try to find some projects and opportunities to stay afloat, to stay in the country, and even to develop. And the thing that we see, even on the example of micro businesses that have only one, two, or few people employed, that they have global expansion on their agenda. They try to enter global markets. If it's food producers, try to enter the shelves of global European supermarkets, and in this way continue developing. And one more thing, businesses suffer from mobilization. Yes, it is really understandable and obvious that it is war in the country, and human capital, war need human capital as well. But business also needs to work, and somehow the balance needed to be found in this regard. Speaking about the future, namely next year, companies are pretty positive. Again, maybe it's some sort of self-motivation for them in such a drastic situation. But business plan to have positive business dynamic. More than half of companies plan to hire people, plan to increase salaries to their employees. Also, businesses plan even some investments as investments into real projects like building a factory, investing into some social initiatives. And by the way, nowadays investing into social initiatives is almost doubled compared to the pre-war time. So basically, businesses become even more socially responsible than it was before. And also, we asked companies about top 3 tasks, for the government that they asked for, and that would help companies to improve the work in the country. And these top 3 is combat against corruption, judicial reform and rule of law, and continuing to sustain macroeconomic stability. Why continuing? Because nowadays we see that Ukraine managed to hold a macroeconomic stability. We see again, looking at NBU, National Bank of Ukraine forecasts that National Bank improved GDP forecast for up to 2.9%. We as a country last week moved to almost flexible exchange rate. And we are moving step by step to currency liberalization. So business hope that all these factors, they will, we as a country will be able to hold on and to scale. Speaking about opportunities and challenges, as it's also really important to talk about them. Obviously, challenges are in place, and top 4 are impossibility to plan mid and long term, and it's unfortunately important but impossible in times of war. It's lack of financing, as we see limited risk insurance to enable investment from the private sector, limited loan and credit programs for companies to continue work in the country. Also, it's people and everything that connected to people, difficulty for male to leave Ukraine, even for short-term business trips. It's mobilization. And by the way, almost more than 80% of businesses in Ukraine, they has mobilized workers, and sometimes even more than 10%. So it's pretty big amount of percentage. And obviously migration, as we can read in media different calculation of migrated people, and again, as I've said, businesses feel that. And the last pretty big challenge is logistic. because the ports are closed nowadays, and as far as we see, railway and tracks, it's hard for them to bear so huge amount of production to export and to import, and therefore it's a huge challenge. Speaking about opportunities, it's rebuilding process, it's future membership in the EU, it's proximity to the EU, and we see that businesses try to use these opportunities, the one that work in the country, as well as global companies not present in Ukraine yet, to understand how they could work in the future. So my next thesis is about rebuilding process. For this regard, as far as we see, money is a very important issue. As my colleague told that for rebuilding, it's really very important to understand who will decide, so that who will pay is also very important to answer, because nowadays we see that there are a lot of discussions about rebuilding of Ukraine, a lot of initiatives from the ministries, from global partners, and all these initiatives want to support rebuilding process, but again, we see that businesses do not see some real money that they could use for doing rebuilding projects. As companies want to be involved in the rebuilding, they understand that private sector will be crucial in this regard. The one that work in Ukraine, they somehow try to do that already now by investing, and we see such global businesses like Nestle, Kingspan, Unilever, Bayer that invested millions of euros or dollars into existing projects. But again, we do not see a huge amount of investments from the foreign businesses. And what needed to be done in this regard? First, it's investment insurance. As some countries have launched investment insurance, like Germany, thanks so much for this instrument, like Poland, like Austria, like USA, like Britain, that was announced during the URC. But sorry, I need to change my to charge my laptop. Sorry.
Yeah, Oksana, we can come back to those issues in the sec. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, just a few theses, and I will finish. So yeah, these investment insurance, as far as we see, are very crucial for foreign investments in the country. And what is crucial for businesses that already work in the country is grants, loans, some programs that they can use for financing their investments. Because nowadays in the country are programs like 579, but unfortunately not all the businesses could apply to that project, not from all the sectors. So basically nowadays companies try to find their way to earn money and to invest, but do not receive some real money from governmental or global programs, and that is what is needed.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Apparently, because of security situation, it's difficult to expect foreign investments coming to Ukraine. But also, it's interesting that you pointed out that business wants fighting the system of preventing corruption, or fighting corruption, judiciary reform. This is also very important for foreign investments. And we see that human capital is a big problem everywhere. So I would like now to turn to Jean-Pierre Froehly, because the idea of this first round was to kind of outline the challenges which we face in Ukraine, and some ideas how to deal with them in the recovery process. And here we come to Jean-Pierre Froehly, who will host a Ukraine Recovery Conference this summer. Germany will host this conference, and it would be interesting to hear to what extent you are planning to include these issues, demographical problems, healthcare, decentralization during planning the conference and planning recovery process of Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me one more time here to your conference. It's always a pleasure being here. I esteem the work of the Centrum Liberale Moderne is really excellent on Ukraine and all the challenges we face. So if the main goal was in this first round to outline, to expose all the challenges, you really succeeded, because I think if the previous speakers, made clear one thing is how complex and how tremendous the task of Ukraine's reconstruction is. For us, it is very important to the mindset, to be in a mindset which accepts that we are in different realities. I think it's very important. We are, on one hand, we are in the reality of war. Ukraine is at war. Ukraine is fighting for survival. And it is very important that our support, of course, is continuing in order to make Ukraine winning that war. On the other hand, we have a prospect and a vision of the future of Ukraine. We have the keyword rebuild better when we talk about reconstruction of Ukraine. And there's a tremendous, not only gray zone in between, gray zone is the wrong word, but there are tremendous topics and tasks and challenges in between the immediate present and the future. However, it is very important that we already today think of the future, because it's not only fantasy, which is next year, in 2 years, in 3 years. It's extremely important already now to plan, to think of the future, because we believe in Ukraine's future. Because our today's support is to make Ukraine win that war and to be able to build a future, rebuild better within the European Union. So this is our task today, and that's why it's extremely important already intellectually to think of how Ukraine's reconstruction may look like in the future. So this is only one, let's say, theoretical aspect, but there's a very practical aspect, because what we can see, and in my view, the previous speakers and the different aspects which had been highlighted make that very clear, that we are in different realities, yes, but they are overlapping, and they are matching, and they are not separated by one each other, but there is a continuous transition between the topics. So what I mean by that is that on one hand, of course, we have what we call the need for immediate repair in Ukraine, the immediate recovery needs of stabilization, of humanitarian aid. So these immediate demands, and when we discuss with the Ukrainian government, it is obvious what these immediate demands are. Often they are quoted 5 points. First of all, of course, energy infrastructure. In light of Russian attacks, and also in light of future, the winter is ahead, Russian attacks. Second, housing. Third, demining. There's a huge task of demining already today. The reports we're talking about, they see the amount of demining needed, and this is already some months ago, of $70 billion only when we talk about demining, a huge task. Then fourth, we talk about critical strategic infrastructure, hospitals, schools, and of course the fifth point we always hear as a very important immediate need of immediate relief and immediate recovery is, of course, to keep Ukraine's economy functioning and to keep business going and also foreign investment going even now and even during wartime. And I think these are obviously elements of the immediate need for rapid recovery, but we cannot separate these elements from our thinking about how the long-term recovery of Ukraine has to look like. And we have, and I think Professor Milbradt made that very clear, and also the other speakers, that the efforts of thinking of a better reconstruction and a better rapid recovery have already to start now. So the conference we are organizing next year, it will be organized jointly within the within the federal government, jointly by the BMZ. My colleague Ulrike is also here in the room. She was on the previous panel, and the Federal Foreign Office, of course, together with the Chancellery and with the other line ministries. The conference will take place, as the Chancellor announced, in New York, in the margins of his conversation with President Zelensky, 11th and 12th of June next year here in Berlin. And first and outmost, this conference will be another landmark sign and strong political signal of solidarity with Ukraine by the international community and by the international coalition in support for Ukraine, covering all the broad range from, on the one hand, the discussion and the organizing and the current work on Ukraine's immediate needs, which is taking place already now in the different international fora. We have the G7 steering group, for instance, with secretariats in Brussels and in Kiev, represented from the German side by State Secretary Flassbart. We have other groups. One is more organizing the immediate support in the energy sector and so forth and so on. But of course, we want also to cover the long-term vision for Ukraine's recovery. And so one aspect, this has already been mentioned, is of course the private sector and engaging also private capital in the recovery process. But I would like to mention only, and I just want to drop the keywords here and then I will stop, just to mention just 3 points. First is, of course, that when we see the current developments also concerning Ukraine's rapprochement with the European Union, the enlargement process is taking shape, is going on. Germany, as the first EU member states after Switzerland and London, of course, we would like also to shape Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction process together with the Ukraine's path towards the European Union. To think reconstruction in light of Ukraine heading towards the European Union. Secondly, this means also for us, but the previous, I think, speakers made that also very clear, we cannot think reconstruction, recovery without also thinking of the reforms implemented and to be continued in Ukraine, be that decentralization, be it the health sector, be it the business sector where still reforms have to. And last but not least, we would like also to emphasize that reconstruction recovery is not only a top-down process, but it's also a bottom-up process. It's a multi-stakeholder process where lots of elements play a role. The local level, the community level, the municipalities, but also civil society, and lots of stakeholders have to be involved and engaged, and that's what also we want to put in the forefront, among other things, next June. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you also for mentioning reforms, because as far as I remember, it was one of the critical points about London conference that reforms were not a part of it. And I think it's very important to include reform agenda when we talk about recovery. And also, I think a big challenge will be coordination. You mentioned this multi-stakeholder situation, EU, different member states of the European Union, local communities in Ukraine, central government, how to coordinate this process. I think it will be a big challenge also. But now actually we have some 20 minutes left, and we are happy to, so we'll collect a few questions and then come back to our panelists. So please go ahead. We have some microphones. Just a moment.
Hello, my name is Natalia Pragnicka. I'm from organization Open Platform and Alliance of Ukrainian Organizations. I have few questions, to be honest. The first question is according to rule of law, and how, and a very clear question is how Germany can support in this process of reintegration, and in this question, justice, freedom without justice is not possible. Maybe you have few ideas, like very concrete ideas, how Germany can support, and also international partners. You already mentioned few of them, but maybe some more also.
Can you perhaps specify a bit? I think it's not completely clear what you mean.
Okay,
you look at Olga.
It's addressed also to Olga. It's about Crimea, the occupation. And we are thinking what would be the process after the occupation of Crimea. And it's about a lot of legal questions. It's about strategy, how to deal with people who were illegally came to Crimea and so on. So how to deal with all these questions, maybe there are some thoughts, but how Germany can support in this case. Maybe there are some programs or projects planned. I have two questions to Mr. Froehly. According to URSC 2024, how do you plan to involve civil society? Very clear, and especially also the question of Ukrainian diaspora in this process, because it's very crucial for people also who are representatives of Ukrainian diaspora. And you spoke also, it's also to all panelists this question, you spoke about reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine. And one point wasn't mentioned so clear as maybe should be. It's about security guarantees for Ukraine, because reconstruction of Ukraine and security guarantees are inseparable, thank you very much, inseparable. Especially in relation to the NATO summit in Washington next year. Do you have common strategy for partners who are dealing with this question? And the last one, it's very short, but the last one very crucial also. How should small and medium enterprises be involved in the reconstruction process of Ukraine? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then you had a question, right? You can present yourself if you want.
My first question was about reintegrated all the refugees who live here in Europe and otherwhere. If they want to go back, I know many of them want to go back into the economy and other in the civil lives. My main question to you is this one. In this war, not only bodies are hurt, but minds and souls are deeply hurt. And for the present, many Ukrainians are very brave. They fight, they help each other. But if there will be peace, these will come back to the minds and the souls. And it will, many people will live with very hard traumata. I think they have to solve it themselves, the Ukrainians. But we have to think if there could be help.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? I would also maybe ask, so one of the features of Ukrainian economy was the strong domination of big business, of oligarchic economy. Before the war, we see that it has changed now. And I wonder if we can get rid of this captured state model of economy after the war completely. So give more floor to small and medium business. I think that would be one of the features of Ukraine becoming a European, not a post-Soviet country. But we can now, maybe, if there are no other questions, come back to, okay, please go ahead. We'll finish it.
2 points, it's connected to the rule of law. When there is a reconstruction, the situation in the country will be similar to the situation we had in Germany after the war. Some areas, some people suffered the loss of all their assets, their houses, everything. And in other parts, the people suffered not these losses. We had then this topic of Lastenausgleich. And of course, it will be an issue also for the Ukraine, how to deal with this differentiation. And I want to add to the long list of challenges the Ukraine faces another point I had not yet mentioned. In the moment, there is a lack of weapons and munition in the country, but nevertheless, there are a lot of weapons in the country. So it will be an issue also to prevent that a black market for weapons will be created. So have it also this point in mind. And we see it, for example, in Serbia, what problems will occur when there are a black market for weapons of any kind.
Okay, thank you so much. We don't have any other questions, so we come back to panelists, and maybe we can divide the answers. So basically, there was a question to Olga, and I don't know how Germany can help. Maybe you have some ideas, although I think it's very difficult to answer, yeah. But the problem of reintegration of people, if you can briefly. Very briefly, because we have like 10 minutes left and we want to finish on time. 15 minutes left.
Thank you for your question. Of course, we have many legal issues, and so I have very concretely ideas and concretely recommendations. So first of all, it's very important supporting the effectiveness of national investigation system, because most of international crimes committed in Ukraine since 2014 and after 2022, of course, will be investigated by the Ukrainian system. And what important, to train Ukrainian prosecutors and investigators and provide them support, technical support, expertise, and so on. Next, it's about our big challenge and our big issue. It's of course about reforms, and first of all, judicial reform, because it's critical, important to also investigate all crimes in Ukraine, including crimes of collaborationism, because unfortunately now it's not good example how we investigate and what court decisions we have in this sphere. One more issue, very important to support initiatives and human rights organizations who collect evidence of international crimes and to work with International Criminal Court and other institutions. I think one more, it's support and cooperate with Ukrainian parliament and help civil society to build and develop like communication between Verkhovna Rada and civil society who work with people in occupied territories, because we need to provide this information. We need to be open each other to working in this sphere, how we can integrate people from occupied territories. So it's very, very briefly.
Thank you so much. And then we had questions to Jean-Pierre Froehly on civil society engagement or role in the recovery conference and security guarantees. You might skip this question if you want, because I don't know, it's not very much your maybe field of expertise, but please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So I would like to emphasize one important point. It's not a German conference, but it is a Ukrainian-German conference. So I always have difficulties when I'm asked on very concrete details. I mean, we are at the beginning of the preparations, and obviously this conference will be organized jointly by Germany and by Ukraine. So we obviously have to discuss with our Ukrainian friends on how we will shape this conference. But what can I make very clear already is that the points I've mentioned also in my intervention, meaning that we see this process as a multi-stakeholder process where civil society should play an important role, and where civil society should not only have a say but should be actively involved, in the planning and in the implementation of reconstruction. And it is our wish also to have that reflected in our conference. It is. I agree with you that Iryna, that there have this kind of arguments after London. But it is not, on the other hand, not so that civil society was not at all presented in London. I think we have to, we can carefully look what the lessons learned from London, but I can make sure here that this is a very important point, an important point for us. So if we have time after, let me come back to the security aspect, but because it's a bit,
I think we should
add on.
Thank you so much. I think we should maybe finish a bit earlier, because the next panel will start, the final panel, immediately after our panel without a break in this room. So maybe there was also a question of reintegration of refugees, and you all mentioned the demographic problem. Two, if you could, Georg, Tetyana and Oksana, maybe if we just changed a little bit the scenario, maybe raise two, 3 issues you find are most important we should focus on when we talk about recovery of Ukraine in the short-term perspective, because in the long-term perspective it's already a different issue. And maybe we will finish with this, because we need to wrap up. So we'll start with you, maybe Tetyana, then Oksana, and then Georg Milbradt. So what we should focus on, let's say, in the next year, 2-3 years maximum, in your field of expertise, if you want. Thank you.
I think we have to support Ramada's development. And I would like to thank you very much, Mr. Milbradt, for his support of the decentralization reform. And I wonder how, Mr. Milbradt, you feel the situation now. You know everything. And I think that Ramada is now in Ukraine is the center of decision-making process. And it depends on them how people will feel themselves when they will come back, because Ramada is responsible for the environment. So it's very important now to make some policies to support them and to save the decentralization in Ukraine.
Thank you. Okay, this was brief. Thank you. One priority. Then you, Oksana.
Yeah, thank you. Probably the most and obvious, it's victory. But speaking about business, we obviously as a country have to do our homework in terms of reforms, in terms of developing strategies of integration, reintegration of people and this homework will be important for companies that already work in Ukraine. They will understand more deeply the rules of the game in the country, and would have some sort of opportunity to plan. And for global businesses, this homework will help to form a better reputation about Ukraine, as we all discussed, like importance to fight with corruption, rule of law, and more. And adding this war risk, it's of course and obviously play not so positive role for Ukraine and investing in Ukraine. And third, coordination. Iryna mentioned that, but again, it's the thing that we see that Ukraine and different governmental authorities in Ukraine are just learning this sort of coordination between each other, between businesses, between global stakeholders. And this process needed to be speed up, because coordination is everything, especially nowadays in the situation that Ukraine are in.
Thank you so much. And Georg, Milbradt, your few points of priorities.
First of all, the reforms are unfinished. A lot of reforms are unfinished, and even the decentralization reform is unfinished. You need constitutional amendments, you need a lot of legislation to make it function, and that is the case for nearly all reform questions in Ukraine. So I hope that the problem of rebuilding the country and at the same time becoming member of the EU makes this process of reforms easier, because you have an objective, an aim, which you haven't before. Before the war, everybody said Ukraine reform, and then said, and what then? Well, maybe you can become a member. That's different now. So you have a real objective, and therefore I think it must be possible. Second, oligarchization. It's not only to reduce the influence of oligarchs on politics and media, but also the influence of oligarchs on markets. You need some sort of demonopolization for giving small and medium-sized business a chance. Ukrainian business as well as foreign business. And therefore, the empowerment of local governments is necessary, but it's not all. The reforms on the central level, as I said, de-oligarchization is necessary. On the local level, give the mayors and the council enough competencies to improve business conditions, because in the end, for solving all your problems, you have to provide homes and jobs. Otherwise, nobody will come back. So that is the key issue. Jobs and homes, especially in the destroyed and occupied territory. And therefore, I think all these reforms and all this political decision have to be in line with this main principle, jobs and apartments.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It seems that local self-governance, continuation of reforms in line with EU requirements or standards, and attracting people coming back to Ukraine to solve the problem of demographic challenge are the key kind of priorities when we talk about recovery. Okay, so we finish ahead of time because we have a final panel here without a break, basically. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you very much to our panelists, to Tetyana from Kharkiv, and Oksana, to Georg, Froehly, and Olga. Thank you.